The scent of stale coffee and sizzling bacon hung thick in the air of the greasy spoon diner, a smell that clung to Amelia's light blue uniform like a second skin. At 8:15 a.m., the morning rush was a symphony of clattering plates, shouted orders, and the low hum of conversations that would be forgotten by lunchtime. Amelia moved through it all with practiced grace, her white apron a blur of efficiency. She was 28, and her life felt like a collection of these moments, refilling coffee for tired truckers, smiling at families with sticky-fingered children, balancing 3 plates on one arm while her mind tallied the tips she needed for rent. It was a life lived on the balls of her feet, always moving, always serving. Then they walked in. The air in the diner seemed to shift, the chaotic warmth suddenly chilled by a pocket of intense silence. He was a man carved from shadows and steel, his suit so impeccably tailored it seemed offensive in the worn-out vinyl booth he chose. His eyes, sharp and dark, swept the room with a dismissive glance that made Amelia feel like a piece of faded wallpaper. Beside him, clutching his arm, was a tiny, elderly woman swallowed by a magnificent dark green kimono, its silk embroidered with golden cranes. Her face was a delicate map of wrinkles, her movements frail as she settled into the booth. Amelia grabbed a menu and a pot of fresh coffee, her professional smile already fixed in place. As she approached, the man was speaking into a phone in terse, clipped Japanese, his voice a low growl of command. He waved a dismissive hand at her, not even bothering to look up. Amelia simply placed the menus on the table and began to pour a coffee for the old woman, whose hands trembled slightly as she reached for the cup. It was then that the woman's eyes, cloudy with age, locked onto Amelia's face. A flicker of recognition sparked within them, a light cutting through a deep fog. Her lips parted, and a single, shaky finger rose to point directly at Amelia. "Son," she whispered in accented English, her voice thin but clear, cutting through the diner's noise and her son's phone call. He finally looked up, his expression one of pure annoyance. "That one. That waitress, she cared for me at the nursing home." Kaido's irritation was a physical thing, a tight coil in his gut. His mother, Chio, was prone to moments of confusion, a side effect the doctors at the Golden Years residence had warned him about. He paid them an astronomical sum, $240,000 a year, wired automatically on the first of every month, to ensure she received the best care money could possibly buy. He had seen the brochures himself, smiling residents, sun-drenched gardens, a staff-to-patient ratio that was second to none. He had signed the checks, fulfilled his duty, and compartmentalized his guilt. Seeing her now, pointing a trembling finger at a random waitress in a cheap diner, only sharpened that guilt into a defensive anger. He ended his call abruptly. "Mother, please," he said, his voice low and firm, meant to quell the scene before it began. "You are mistaken. This is just a restaurant," but Chio's gaze did not waver. It remained fixed on the young woman, who stood frozen by their table, coffee pot in hand, her expression a mixture of surprise and concern. Kaido sighed, preparing to apologize for his mother's outburst and leave. It was easier to run, to throw money at the problem and disappear back into his world of concrete and numbers. But for the first time in a long time, his mother was insistent. "No," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "Amelia." Her name is Amelia. The use of a name stopped him cold. It was specific. It was clear. His gaze, for the first time, truly fell upon the waitress. He saw not just a uniform, but a person. He noticed the exhaustion etched around her kind eyes, the way she held herself with a quiet dignity despite the awkwardness of the situation. He watched as an elderly man at the counter fumbled with his wallet, dropping coins that scattered across the floor. Without a moment's hesitation, Amelia was there, kneeling on the grimy linoleum, helping the man gather his change with a gentle smile and a reassuring word. There was a patience in the gesture, a genuine warmth that couldn't be faked. It was the kind of attention to detail he paid for, yet had never witnessed. A cold dread, heavier than any business deal gone wrong, began to seep into his bones. What if his mother wasn't confused at all? Amelia felt the weight of the man's stare like a physical pressure. It was analytical, stripping away her uniform and her professional smile, searching for something she couldn't comprehend. She had seen that look before, but usually from men who saw her as an object or an obstacle. This was different. This was calculating. The old woman, Chio, had said her name. The sound of it in this strange context sent a jolt through her. She searched the woman's face, trying to push past the web of wrinkles and the cloudy gaze, and then she saw it. It wasn't a memory of a face, but of a feeling. The memory of small, cold hands gripping hers for comfort in the sterile quiet of a 3 a.m. room change. The memory of a silent woman who would only watch the sparrows outside her window for hours on end. It was Mrs. Tanaka. That's what they called her at Golden Years. A resident who rarely spoke, whose files said her wealthy son paid for a private suite, but had only visited twice in the year Amelia had worked there. Mrs. Tanaka? Amelia whispered, the name feeling foreign outside the hushed corridors of the nursing home. The woman's eyes filled with tears, and she gave a small, affirming nod. Kaito's entire demeanor shifted. The annoyance evaporated, replaced by a tense, dangerous stillness. You will sit with us, he commanded, his voice no longer dismissive but laced with an unnerving intensity. It wasn't a request. Amelia hesitated, glancing toward her boss behind the counter, but the look on Kaito's face told her that refusing was not an option. She placed the coffee pot on an adjacent table and slid into the vinyl booth opposite them. The air crackled with unspoken questions. Kaito leaned forward, his expensive cologne a jarring scent amidst the smell of fried eggs. My mother says you cared for her. Explain. The demand was blunt, but beneath it, Amelia could hear a tremor of something else, not anger, but a deep, unsettling fear. The diner faded away, and the antiseptic smell of the Golden Years residence filled her senses. She was back in that place of forced smiles and quiet desperation, a place where kindness was a currency more valuable and far rarer than the money that funded it. The Golden Years residence was marketed as a paradise for the elderly, a final, luxurious chapter. The lobby was filled with fresh flowers and the sound of a softly playing piano. But beyond the pristine facade, the reality was one of profound neglect, stretched thin by a skeleton crew of overworked and underpaid caregivers. Amelia had taken the job out of necessity, but she stayed because she couldn't bear to leave the residents to their fate. She remembered Chio vividly. She was known as the Silent One. Most of the staff left her alone, marking charts with brisk, impersonal efficiency. They would drop off her food tray, deliver her medication, and leave. But Amelia saw the loneliness in her eyes, a deep, cavernous sorrow that 1,000 sun-drenched gardens couldn't fill. Amelia made it her mission to connect. She learned that Chio loved the color green, the scent of jasmine, and the taste of red bean paste. So Amelia started wearing a small jade pin on her uniform. She brought in a small jasmine plant for her windowsill. On her days off, she would spend hours in her own small kitchen, learning from online videos how to make dorayaki, a simple Japanese pancake with sweet red bean filling. The first time she brought one to Chio, the woman had looked at the small cake on the plate, then up at Amelia, and for the first time in months, she had spoken a single word in Japanese. Arigato, thank you. Amelia used her phone to learn other simple phrases. Oyasumi nasai, good night. Ohayo gozaimasu, good morning. She would brush Chio's long, silvery hair, humming old tunes her grandmother used to sing. She discovered that Chio had been a master of ikebana, the art of Japanese flower arrangement. So Amelia would bring her flowers, not the sterile arrangements from the lobby, but simple, wild daisies and dandelions she picked from a field near her apartment. They weren't grand, but they were real. They were a presence. They were proof that someone saw her, not as a room number or a payment plan, but as a person. She was showing up, in a place where the one person who should have, never did. You worked at the Golden Years residence? Kaito's voice was sharp, cutting through her memories. Amelia flinched, brought back to the sticky tabletop of the diner booth. She nodded, her throat tight. Yes. For about a year. I was laid off 2 months ago. Kaido's knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the table. The carefully constructed world he had built around his mother's care was beginning to crumble, revealing the rotten foundation beneath. He had outsourced his love, paid a premium for a service, and assumed that the high price tag guaranteed high quality. He had mistaken a financial transaction for a human connection. Laid off. Why? He pressed, his voice dangerously low. Amelia looked down at her hands, remembering the cold, clinical meeting with the facility's administrator. I was told I was inefficient, she said quietly. I was spending too much time with individual residents. It was affecting my ability to complete my checklist of duties for the entire wing on schedule. They said my personal attachments were unprofessional, the words hung in the air, an indictment of a system that prioritized checklists over compassion. Kaido felt a wave of nausea. He had been paying for checklists. He had been paying for someone to efficiently neglect his mother while maintaining the illusion of care. He looked at Chio, who was now holding Amelia's hand across the table, her grip surprisingly strong. He saw the genuine affection in his mother's eyes, a light he hadn't seen in years. It was a light this woman, this waitress who made minimum wage, had sparked back to life while he was busy in boardrooms, building an empire that suddenly felt worthless. It's stories like this that remind us what truly matters. If you believe that compassion is more valuable than any currency, let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. The truth was a bitter pill, and Kaido was choking on it. He had not just failed his mother, he had paid handsomely for the privilege of doing so. The shift in Kaido was seismic. The cold, impenetrable businessman receded, and in his place was a son drowning in shame. He waved away his bodyguards who had been hovering by the door, their presence suddenly an obscene display of the power he had so profoundly misused. His phone buzzed incessantly on the table, a stream of urgent demands from an empire that no longer held his attention. He silenced it with a sharp tap of his finger. Everything had narrowed to this small booth, to this woman whose quiet integrity had just shattered his world. I want you to tell me everything, he said, and for the first time, his voice held no command, only a raw, desperate plea. He looked at Amelia, truly seeing her now, not as a waitress, not as a former employee, but as the sole guardian of a truth he desperately needed to understand. He tried to fall back on his old ways, his only known method of fixing things. He reached for his wallet. I will compensate you for your time. For everything, Amelia gently shook her head, her gaze unwavering. That isn't necessary. What your mother needed, what they all need in that place, it isn't something you can buy. Her words were not an accusation, but a simple statement of fact, and they landed with more force than any physical blow. They exposed the poverty of his soul. He had an infinite capacity to write checks but had forgotten how to simply show up. He finally understood. This wasn't about money. This was about justice. It was about reclaiming the dignity that had been stolen from his mother, hidden behind fraudulent reports and a 5-star rating. He made a decision. I am going to destroy that place, he said, his voice a low, chilling promise. Not just the facility. The entire corporation behind it. And I need your help. He slid a black business card across the table. Quit this job. Today. You work for me now. It was an order, but the context had changed. It was no longer the command of a superior, but the request of an ally. A broken man asking for a guide through the wreckage he had created. The transition from the greasy spoon diner to Kaido's penthouse was a dizzying culture shock. Amelia had gone from a world of cracked vinyl and the smell of burnt toast to a minimalist expanse of glass, steel, and white marble that overlooked the entire city. The silence was the most jarring part. It was a heavy, expensive silence, broken only by the distant hum of the metropolis below. Kaido had been true to his word. Within an hour, one of his stern-faced associates had arrived at the diner, handed her boss a stack of $100 bills that made his eyes bulge, and escorted Amelia and Chio to a sleek black car. Now, Chio was resting in a guest suite larger than Amelia's entire apartment, tucked into sheets with a thread count that was probably higher than her credit score. Kaido had traded his bespoke suit for a simple black sweater and trousers, but he still radiated an aura of immense power. It was just redirected now, focused with laser-like intensity on the task at hand. He led Amelia to a large glass table where a thin laptop and a single, thick file folder sat waiting. "This is the file Golden Years sent me every month," he explained, his voice tight with controlled fury. He opened it, revealing pages of glossy photographs of smiling residents, glowing testimonials, and daily reports on Chio's health and activities, all meticulously forged. Enjoyed social hour in the garden, participated in group art therapy, excellent appetite and spirits. He read the lies aloud, each one a fresh stab of guilt. "She hates gardens. She has no interest in art. And you told me she barely ate." He looked at Amelia, his eyes dark with a pain that resonated with her own anger at the system. "I need you to tell me the truth. I need you to give a voice to what they tried to silence." He pushed the file towards her. In that moment, they were no longer a mafia boss and a waitress. They were two people united by a shared purpose, to expose a cruel deception and bring a voice to the voiceless. The fight for justice had begun. Over the next few days, the penthouse became their war room. The glass table was soon covered in legal documents, financial statements, and Amelia's handwritten notes. They worked side by side, fueled by black coffee and a burning sense of purpose. In this crucible of shared focus, the carefully constructed walls between them began to dissolve. Late one night, surrounded by spreadsheets detailing the parent company's obscene profit margins, Kaito finally spoke of the guilt that haunted him. "After my father died," he began, his voice barely a whisper as he stared out at the city lights, "I buried myself in his work. Expanding the organization, increasing our territory, it was all I knew. It was easier than feeling. I saw my mother's grief, and instead of facing it with her, I saw it as another problem to be solved. So I found the most expensive solution I could and wrote a check." He turned to look at her, his expression stripped of all its usual authority, leaving only a profound vulnerability. "I wasn't just absent. I was a coward." Amelia listened, her heart aching for the lonely boy who had hidden his grief behind a fortress of power. She found herself sharing her own story, telling him about the grandmother who had raised her, whose final years were spent in a state-run facility that smelled of despair. "I became a caregiver because I couldn't be there for her in the end," she confessed, her own voice thick with emotion. "I promised myself I would give to strangers the kindness I failed to give my own family." They were two sides of the same coin, both running from a past failure, both trying to atone through their actions. Later that evening, as Amelia's stomach rumbled, Kaito disappeared into the kitchen. He returned not with takeout, but with 2 steaming bowls of katsudon, a simple dish of pork cutlet, and egg over rice. He had cooked for her. It was a clumsy, unpracticed gesture, but it was more meaningful than any 5-star meal. As they ate in comfortable silence, he watched her hands. The same hands that had poured coffee, that had brushed his mother's hair, were now confidently highlighting fraudulent entries in a corporate ledger. He was falling in love, not just with her kindness, but with her strength. The downfall of Omni Health Corp., the parent company of Golden Years residents, was swift and brutal. Armed with Amelia's detailed testimony of systemic neglect and Kaito's immense resources, they unleashed a legal and media firestorm. Amelia provided the heart of the story, the human cost. She spoke of residents left in soiled clothes, of call buttons ignored for hours, of the profound loneliness that was the true sickness in that place. Kaito provided the muscle. His team of ruthless lawyers and investigators uncovered a massive scheme of insurance fraud, embezzlement, and criminal negligence that went all the way to the board of directors. The story was explosive. News channels ran nightly segments showcasing the stark contrast between Omni Health's compassionate marketing and the grim reality Amelia described. The company's stock plummeted. The CEO was forced to resign in disgrace, and federal investigations were launched. But Kaito didn't stop there. This was never just about punishment, it was about redemption. In a move that stunned the financial world, he orchestrated a hostile takeover of the crippled Omni Health Corporation. He didn't liquidate it. He gutted the entire executive board and announced the formation of the Chio Tanaka Foundation, a new nonprofit entity that would now control the entire network of facilities. Its new, sole mission was to create a new standard of elder care based on dignity, respect, and human connection. One evening, they stood on the balcony of the penthouse, watching a news report detail the first of the newly reformed homes opening its doors. Chio was inside, sleeping peacefully, a genuine smile on her face. Kaido turned to Emilia, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "You did this," he said, his voice thick with an emotion she had never heard from him before. "You showed me that true power isn't about control or money. It's about how you care for people." He took her hand, his touch gentle. "I spent my life building an empire of shadows. You build worlds in small, quiet rooms with nothing but your heart. I don't want to be in the shadows anymore. Please, Emilia, build a world with me." Their wedding was the antithesis of everything Kaido's life had been. There were no powerful figures making deals in hushed corners, no ostentatious displays of wealth. It was held in the tranquil Japanese garden of a small, private estate, with only a handful of people in attendance. Chio sat in the front row, radiant in a kimono the color of cherry blossoms, her eyes sparkling with a joy that transcended a lifetime of sorrow. Kaido's most trusted men stood awkwardly in the background, their formidable presence softened by the unfamiliar task of witnessing such a tender moment. One of them, a mountain of a man with a scarred face, was seen discreetly wiping a tear from his eye. Emilia wore a simple, elegant ivory dress, her natural beauty outshining any jewel. When Kaido saw her walking towards him, his carefully maintained composure crumbled. Here was his redemption, his hope, his future, all embodied in the gentle strength of this one incredible woman. He had offered her a world of riches, but what they had found together was something far more precious, a shared purpose. Their new life began not with a lavish honeymoon, but with a visit to the first of the new Chio Tanaka care homes. The building was bright and airy, filled with the scent of fresh flowers and home-cooked food, not disinfectant. The staff weren't rushed. They were sitting with residents, reading, talking, listening. Emilia walked through the halls, not as an employee, but as the co-founder, her insights shaping every policy, her compassion the guiding principle of the entire foundation. Kaido walked beside her, no longer a ruler of the underworld, but a partner. He had learned that protecting his family wasn't about building higher walls, but about opening doors to let the light in. One afternoon, they sat with Chio in the garden, watching her teach a small group of residents the art of ikebana. She was laughing, her hands steady as she arranged the flowers. Kaido reached for Emilia's hand, his heart full. He had spent a lifetime accumulating power, only to discover that the greatest strength he would ever know was the quiet, unwavering love of the woman sitting next to him.